how are we doing this evening? Well, I hope. So, I've been thinking about this for a while and I decided I wanted to get it off my chest, I guess. Very concerned, I'm not sure that's the right word, that might be an overstatement, about where knowledge is going. What happened to it all? Where's it hiding? Yes, it's in books, crack one, but seriously, you know, in today's world, we're bombarded constantly with pointless talk, just pointless. Insane quantities of words, both visual, audible, written, copious amounts of information, and it's getting more and more difficult to sort of pick what's real information or knowledge and what's nonsense or just not important to anyone. Now understand, stupidity is never blind, and it's certainly never mute. But it's never been a problem really to get people to express themselves, stupid or otherwise. I think the challenge is providing gaps of silence and solitude. Provide those gaps of silence and solitude where those folks might eventually find something that they actually want to say that has some sort of meaning, right? So I just finished reading, in no particular order, a few books, but this is Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, written in 1932. I'm sure you read it in high school. If you didn't, go read it now. Stop watching, go read the book. Mr. Orwell, George Orwell, 1984, written in 1949. Again, theoretically, you should have read this in high school. If you didn't, go read it now. And Neil Postman, Amusing Ourselves to Death. This was written in 1985. Some of you may not have written it in high school because you had already graduated. But it is worth a read. It's fascinating. All three of these books. Now, the first two books, Brave New World in 1984, are essentially about mass oppression. Now, two very different forms or types of oppression, indeed, but oppression just the same. In 1984, the authoritarian government watches over our every move, right? Society's every move. They tell us to wear the same clothes, have the same thoughts. War is peace. Ignorance is strength. Hardcore censorship throughout. It's an excellent read. Now in Brave New World, Huxley's society is on basically a drug. I think it was Soma. I think that's what it was called. But it was that drug sort of kept everybody in a state of pleasure and love, and they sort of accepted that authoritarian brainwashing that happens while they're in the baby factories having copious amounts of sex. Orwell, he's warning us about external oppression. And Huxley, he's trying to warn us about becoming so used to our oppression that we sort of participate in our very oppression. Orwell feared the cats who wanted to ban books, and Huxley feared there'd be no reason to ban books because no one would want to read one. Now, Mr. Postman, he basically stated, again, amusing ourselves to death, he basically stated that it's far more serious than banned books or lack of caring about banned books. It's being deprived of authentic information, and that we're losing ourselves in the sense of what it means to be well informed, which is fascinating. So, because the reality is, I think ignorance is correctable, right? But what can we do if we take ignorance, to be knowledge. And let's face facts, our attention spans as a society are shrinking at an incredible rate. And I'm sure this is due in no small part to the new short form content that exists, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter or X, very clever Elon. Twitter was too hard to say. Instagram, all the other nonsense, and the non-stop ads. Even on the news, there's a ticker tape running below giving you the latest football scores or letting you know what the Ford stock is doing, or a whole series of I don't say pointless information, but pointless information not allowing you to focus on what's being said to discern if it matters or not. Now, I imagine most things in life are basically a metaphor, right? Because a clock is a metaphor for time. Well, sort of. I guess not, because time certainly existed before clocks. Clocks is just how we decided to measure time, and it's just how we decided to measure time based on the rotation. Okay, I'm getting fine. Clock is a measurement, or is a metaphor for time. Books would be a metaphor for knowledge, and media, in all its forms, is sort of a metaphor, I suppose, for information, which means it's not actually information or knowledge. Or I suppose time. A clock is not time. It is a metaphor for time, because time, anyway. So watching the news, just watching it, is in a sense a metaphor for knowledge and information. It's not information, knowledge, or truth. It's just a metaphor. And since we no longer really live in a print society, I'm sure you would agree, we now live in a visual and audio society. Proof is what's happening right now. And I don't know that that's good or bad, that's just a reality. But when you think about a couple centuries back, I used to say last century, but that was just 20 some years ago. But, the turn of the 1800s into the 1900s, as this country expanded west, information and knowledge was only as fast as the fastest horse, i.e. the Pony Express, or locomotives, the great trains of the Midwest and the Northeast. That's how information traveled. It was, quite frankly, compared to today, incredibly slow. We relied on, our news was very local, the town, the area that you lived in. Hey, Ted fell out of a tree and broke his arm. And it's like, oh Christ, I was just talking to Ted earlier today. It's a bummer that he fell out of his tree. We knew Ted. We knew that Ted was a hooplehead and shouldn't have been climbing the tree anyway. And then days or weeks or months later, you would get a letter from a friend from out of state, or information that pertained to things greater than the 4 blocks that you occupied in your town or shire. Then along came the telegraph, and that changed everything, because now information was nearly lightning fast, right? You could be living in New York and say Oklahoma, and at the same time get information about something that happened in Louisiana within a couple of hours. And that telegraph operator would then transmit it to the local town, et cetera, et cetera. And that changed everything. And I think what changed was the quest for more information started. Not what was important started to take a backseat. It had to be interesting, salacious, shocking, maybe fear-inducing. Yes, I'm talking about the telegraph. It didn't matter, because the best thing you can always do is play on people's fears, right? Because we know ignorance leads to fear, and fear leads to hate, and hate ultimately leads to war and destruction, because we don't understand. So local news became less and less important, because who gives a shit about Ted falling out of a tree? This is way more interesting. A Kardashian just got a boob job, or I don't know, Taylor Swift is now dating some football player, as if that makes any difference in my life whatsoever, or yours, frankly, beyond, oh, I have this information, but more on that in a second. That speed of info is what became important. And the reality is that I think it was in that moment, on some level, that information and truth, as it is today, it's become a commodity. It doesn't really have a value except what society as a whole places on it. And maybe it's always been like that, but I don't think so. So anyway, today, I don't think intelligence is really measured. Well, let me back up. Intelligence is now measured with knowing things rather than knowing about things, the context. And I'll give the example of the conflict going on with Israel and Gaza, or Israel, the Palestinians in Gaza, and Hamas. Do we ask why? We're just told things. We read bullet points and we'll make certain assumptions based on our presumptions of what we may or may not know, and things can be taken out of context. Once upon a time, the written word, you had to decide whether that was factual or not. You would read it and go, that seems wrong. I need to dig into this some more to determine whether or not it was true or not. But visual and audio manipulation happens, and it's much easier today than it was just a few short years ago. So when you see something, it sure looks to be real, but maybe it's not. Whenever you see a conversation like this, if there's an edit, it's for a reason. Edits don't act. See, I could cut that out. Edits don't happen accidentally. They're edited, and if they're edited, then there's a reason for that. Whether it be benign or malignant, it's still an edit. Every time there's a cut, it's for a reason, and that reason may be nefarious in nature. Deep fakes are a perfect example. You've all seen them. I've seen them too. I don't really know what my point is of all of this, other than where is the knowledge going? What do we spend time trying to understand? Two of these gentlemen were terrified about oppression, fascism, quite frankly, and I'm sure it's in the context of their times. Written in the 30s and the 40s, Mr. Orwell was in Spain during Franco and and I know he fought in the war and stuff, and he witnessed fascism firsthand, and I'm sure it scars you, and it's a bad thing. And I don't know a whole lot about Mr. Huxley other than it's a wonderful book, and Mr. Postman spends a lot of time talking about television and mass media, and this was in the 80s. He had enough forethought to sort of see what was happening. We flash forward here 40 years, and it's just amazing how much non-information is presented to the world, and what we believe and don't believe. And I find some of it troubling. Anyway, like I said, I just wanted to get this sort of off my chest. I don't really have an answer other than my line that I have said from time to time is crack a book. That's where information is hidden. And that's a metaphor in itself, because obviously you can go to Google, which is just a search engine, and you can hunt, and you can find the History Channel, and you can find automotive channels, you can find all kinds of areas that provide information, which you don't have to necessarily believe, but you have to write stuff down, and you look, and you sort of draw your own conclusions. Once upon a time, a president could write an eloquent speech, and he was known for that speech. You may not know what Thomas Jefferson looked like, because there were no cameras, obviously, et cetera, other than our renditions. But when we sure as shit know what Trump looks like, or Biden, instantaneously, and I don't know if that's good or bad, but do we tend to judge the source of the information from a visual standpoint, or how the information is presented, other than just the actual information? And I don't know. I don't think it's an accident that in Britain, the news are all called talking heads, and they're all pretty in their own way, both the men and the women. There's not a lot of what we consider unattractive people in the media, right? Because all they care about is that you watch, click and like, click and subscribe, so that they can make some money. So if their ads They can run more ads, they can get more money for the ads, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's all that matters, not necessarily the information. And all us are guilty of looking for the salacious and more interesting, not the hard, dirty work of knowledge and digging in and actually learning something. But I'm starting to ramble. I've been drinking a while. And like I said, I just wanted to share this. I don't think I really have an answer, but hopefully I've inspired you to at least read one of these 3 books, or all 3 actually. They're all wonderful, wonderful books. They won't take you very long to read. You ought to be able to knock these out in a couple of weeks, quite frankly. And I think if you've not read them, they'll make an impact on you and help you think a little bit differently about things. And again, be slow to necessarily speak, because remember, it's better they think you a fool than open your mouth and remove all doubt. Anyway, hope you kind of got a kick out of this. As always in life, be kind, be humble, and be forgiving. We'll see you next time. Bye.